Episode 104, April 26 to May 12, 1915. I saw the enemy's flag hauled down. With Botha in German Southwest Africa. By Lieutenant Colonel H.F. Trew. Read by Bernard de Broglio. The author was Commandant of General Botha's bodyguard during his victorious advance into German Southwest Africa. In this chapter, he describes the final march to the German capital of Windhoek, the surrender of the town, and its occupation by Botha. The staunch and kindly character of the great Boer general emerges triumphantly in Colonel Trew's narrative. We left Swakopmund about 7 a.m. on April the 26th, and as we trekked along could hear the guns booming at Trekoppies. The general, Botha, and staff did a quick ride out and caught us up at Husab that night. From there we trekked by night through Salem to Kaltenhausen. A peculiar incident had occurred at this place a short time before the advance began. A party of intelligence scouts had camped there for the night. They next rode into Salem on bareback horses, stating that their camp had been charged by German cavalry in the early morning and they had barely escaped with their lives. A commando was sent to investigate and found the deserted camp with saddles and blankets all over the place and the spoor of a troop of quagga running through it. We reached Kaltenhausen at midnight. It was bitterly cold, and our transport with food and blankets was far behind. I was trying to get some sleep between two small fires when the general's Batman Johnston came up and said, "Would you like a drop of old French brandy, sir?" "Where did you get that brandy?" "Well, sir," was the answer, "I always carry a flask of it in case the general is taken poorly." I honestly think that brandy saved me from an illness and can never be grateful enough to good old Johnston for his happy thought. On this night march, the general had a very narrow escape from an enemy mine. We were riding along a path which passed through a narrow neck in the hills. The general was riding in front with the staff, followed by the bodyguard. We were just clear of the neck when the whole landscape was lit up by a bright flash, and an appalling explosion occurred behind us. The general sent an officer back to see if anyone had been hurt. When he returned, he reported that a servant had been trying to catch a loose horse, which had put its foot on the pin of a mine and had been blown to pieces. The servant, who was fortunately some distance off when it exploded, was unhurt. I shall never forget the general's heartfelt reply. The hand of God is surely with us. How the hoofs of 120 horses had passed over that pin without touching it was a miracle. One thing that amused us all through this trek was the methodical manner in which the efficient German engineers had reversed all the signposts along the various roads. We soon perceived that they were very bad at finding their way about on the veldt. In fact, the burghers said that if they shot the guide who was with each German patrol, the other members of the party would have to surrender, because they would not be able to find their way back to camp. After a fight in the bush, the night was always made brilliant by the German Very lights, which were fired from their camp to collect the stragglers. Intensive civilization seems to dull that sense in a human being which enables him to find his way about in unknown country. When I speak of the commandos, it is to be understood that they were not composed of men descended only from Dutch ancestors. There were a number of men of English descent on their nominal rolls. The prevailing language spoken, however, was Afrikaans, but it was impossible to distinguish between the different races in the ranks. The great thing was that they were all good South Africans, united by a common purpose, a happy augury for the future. It was a peculiar pleasure to me to serve with the Boer commandos. I had fought against them in the Boer War and had respected them as worthy foemen. Now it was intensely interesting to serve on the same side and observe their methods. I formed the opinion that they are the finest irregular mounted troops in the world. Their wonderful mobility, quick eye for country, capacity to undergo hardship, and individual initiative are admirable. I found that General Botha, who had always worked under the commando system, failed to realize that it was impossible for regular units trained in drill and discipline to get under arms and out of camp as quickly as a commando. The pace of a regular unit getting out of camp and on the move is the pace of the slowest man. The order is given to saddle up. When all the horses are saddled, the troops or squadrons form up on their parade ground, and not until the whole regiment is reported present and correct do they move off. The pace of the commando in a hurry is the pace of the quickest man. The commandant blows a whistle and gives the order to saddle up. As soon as he and his staff are ready, he moves off on the line of march. The slower men, as they successively get saddled up, gallop after the commando and take up their proper places in the ranks. Towards the end of the campaign, I had to adopt the commando method with the bodyguard, particularly as I often got very short notice when we were to move. The general was so secretive about his movements that often the first intimation I got that we were going to trek was when Johnston was seen saddling up his horse. When we halted, I sometimes asked the general how long our stay would be, and very seldom got a definite answer. The general rode every foot of the way to Karibib, as no motor cars were taken on this trek. How he kept it up was remarkable, particularly as he was not really fit at this time. He had dismounted from his horse one day and was sitting on a camp stool with his leggings off. I noticed that his legs seemed very swollen and remarked on it. He said, "I am not well. Look here." And with that, he dug the point of his finger into his calf. It made a hole nearly an inch deep, and he remarked, "That hole will not fill up for a quarter of an hour." His courage was remarkable, and I think it was only his presence, right up with them, that encouraged his men to make the efforts that they did. From Kaltenhausen, we moved to Otjimbingwe, where there was an old mission station. On the north of the river, in an open plain, were set a number of small rocky kopjes. The Germans tried to make a stand here, but were quickly galloped out of it by Brits' men. The German forces were roughly handled, and a good many prisoners were taken. We here found quite good grazing, and a splendid water supply. Of course, the grass was brown in colour and short. On May the 2nd, we moved to the pot mine farm, and there had a most enjoyable rest for 2 days. While we were here, General Smuts arrived by motorcar for a conference with the Commander-in-Chief. He had come through by motorcar from Swakopmund along the Northern Railway line, via Ebony and Usakos. This was the first news we had received that Skinner's force had occupied Usakos, where there were important railway workshops. General Smuts was looking well and was as energetic as ever. By the General's order, 2 chairs were placed in the orchard, and there the 2 great men sat and compared notes. General Smuts lunched with General Botha and staff, and then set off on his long journey back. I heard a good story afterwards about this trip from the Imperial Light Horse. It appears that the Germans vacated Usakos one morning, and the Imperial Light Horse took over in the afternoon. That night, one of their outpost sentries saw a man creeping towards him. He challenged and received the answer, "Friend." Just then he saw a second figure join the first and became very suspicious. "Who are you?" he asked. The reply was, "I am General Smuts, Minister of Defence for the Union." "Oh, really?" said the sentry. "Who is your friend?" "This is Sir William Hoy, the General Manager of Railways of the Union," was the reply. "That's a likely story," said the sentry. "The Minister of Defence and General Manager of Railways creeping about in the desert at this hour of night. You wait until I get my officer to have a look at you." General Smuts commended the sentry for his vigilance. It appears that he and Sir William were scouting up to Usakos, as they did not know if our troops or the Germans were in possession of the village. General Smuts took great chances, for they only had one small automatic pistol between them, and Sir William was no fighting man. We left Pot Mine Farm at midnight, behind Britz's commando, marching on Karibib. Between us and Karibib stretched a high range of mountains. General Botha had given General Britz orders to seize the pass through which the road ran as soon as possible, as he wished to helio to General Myburgh, who was operating on our right. When we reached the pass, the general was furious to find Britz's force off-saddled at the foot of it. He ordered me to take the bodyguard up and seize the pass. We were going off at a trot when he ordered me to gallop. All the way up, I expected to hear a mine go off, for it was rocky on each side of the road and we had to keep on it. However, we were lucky. For some reason, the Germans had not mined it. When we reached the top, we could see the German scouts galloping back into Karibib, which lay some 5 miles away. To the north of the town, big dust clouds were rising, and this was their main body retiring. When old Kuhn came up the pass, he seemed quite disappointed that the police had escaped being blown up. I think the old gentleman fully expected the pass to have been mined, hence his delay at the foot of it. We entered Karibib that evening, and the general immediately issued stringent orders against looting or interfering in any way with the inhabitants. I would like to remark here that the conduct of the Union troops in the towns they occupied was remarkably good, and that as a result the Germans soon showed no compunction in leaving their women and children to our care. We now found that though the main body of the troops of the German Southern Force had escaped to the north, it had been such a close thing that they had been obliged to abandon a number of troop trains on the railway running from Karibib to Windhoek via Okanja. The only demolition they had time to complete was a railway bridge east of Karibib. The staff took up their quarters in an abandoned hotel, and the general in a private house near to it. An amusing incident took place at the bodyguard camp next day. The men had pitched their tents in the yard of the German police barracks. The German sergeant major's wife was in possession of the married quarters and had stored about 20 buckets full of water on the veranda. There was a well and windmill in the yard, but as there was a flat calm, it was not working. The bodyguard cook stole 2 of these buckets of water, and the lady unfortunately caught him in the act. She seized a large mop and pursued him amidst the applause of the men. He dropped the buckets of water and fled, but catching his foot in a tent rope, fell at her feet. She immediately began to belabour him with the mop. Sergeant Major Rourke, who was an Irishman, afraid that she might injure the cook, asked her to desist. She turned on him and said, "My husband is a brave man. He will kill you all. He is a bitter ender. He will never surrender." "No, neither would I, if you were my wife," said Rourke quietly. The infantry, who had been moving up from Jackal's Water behind us, now arrived at Karibib. They had done some wonderful marching and were bitterly disappointed at not being opposed. We now received news of the sinking of the Lusitania and of the anti-German riots and destruction of German property in the Union. I have never seen the general so angry as he was at the latter news. He said, "I hate mob law. It is always cruel, cowardly, and unjust. What have the unfortunate German citizens in the Union to do with the policy of the German government on the high seas? If the cowards want to show their disgust at the sinking of this steamer, let them enlist and go to France." There was a rumour that night that some of the infantry were coming in to wreck Karibib. However, the general saw their officers and they exerted their influence on the men and quietened them down. We heard that the Germans had now made Grootfontein, to the north of us, their new capital. Karibib was made Union Army headquarters and the railway was pushed through from Swakopmund. All preparations were made for a fresh advance to the north, and the repair of the demolished railway bridge was undertaken. The South African Mounted Rifle Brigade under General Lucan had now joined up and was stationed at Usakos. On May the 11th, the general left Karibib by motor car to demand the surrender of Windhoek, which none of our troops had yet entered. As he did not know if the intervening country had been cleared of German troops, he took with him, in cars, a detachment of the bodyguard and 2 Maxims of the 4th SAMR. We camped for the night in the thorn bush at Oksisi, where we were joined by Generals Myburgh and Kun Brits. We were a cheery party around the campfire that night. Besides the 3 generals, there was present Colonel Collier, Lieutenant Colonel de Waal, Major Bock, Major Lippold, Major Esselin, and myself. We rolled up in our blankets on the ground for the night. The general, as a great luxury, slept on his motor car cushions. In the very early morning, we all got up and started to try to improve our appearance for the official entry into the enemy's capital. Brits and Myburgh were trimming their beards with scissors. Collier was shaving, with his mirror hung up on a thorn bush. Others of us were polishing boots, leggings, spurs, and belts. General Botha awoke and sat up in his blankets, yawning. Suddenly a look of amused surprise came into his eyes as he took in the scene, and he said, in a sad tone, "Oh, the poor German women." A formal summons to surrender was sent in to Windhoek under a white flag. The answer was received, and the procession of cars drove on to a ridge covered with scattered thorn bush, which gave us a good view of the town. The German flag was still flying over Government House, but as we watched, it came slowly fluttering down. The commandos, who had lined each side of the road as we approached, now formed in column behind the cars. The burgomaster and town clerk of Windhoek arrived to meet the general and made the formal surrender. We looked at them strangely, for they were the first clean, well-fed men we had seen for some considerable time. In their beautifully laundered white suits and white helmets, they looked very spruce. They then left, and after a short interval, the procession entered the town. The general proceeded to the rat house and took up his stand on the veranda overlooking a large public square. The commandos filed in and lined three sides of the square, and what a fine sight they made. Their ponies, tired and dejected, with all their ribs showing, the men in the saddles, thin-faced and gaunt, bearded and dust-covered, but their eyes were bright, and so were their rifles. A thrill of pride ran through me as I looked at my fellow South Africans, and thought what they had suffered and endured in the few short days since they had left Zwakelmund. The inside of the square was packed with the inhabitants, anxious to hear from the Commander-in-Chief's own lips what their fate would be. At a given signal, the Union Jack was run up to the top of the flagpole by the Sergeant Major of the bodyguard, and the troops presented arms. General Botha then made his speech. He told them that if they were well behaved and obeyed the regulations he would make, they had nothing to fear. There would be no looting, nor would any of his men be allowed to enter a private house. They could sell food to the troops, but no food would be taken by force. Colonel de Waal and I now left to search for quarters where the general and staff could be billeted. We found a large hotel and procured quarters there. As we had not tasted alcohol for some time, we wandered into the bar and asked the barmaid for 2 whiskies and soda. "Whisky kaput," was the reply. "Well, brandy." "Brandy kaput." "Beer?" "Beer kaput." Then we asked, "Have you anything at all to drink?" "Yes, arak." "Well, give us 2 araks and soda," we said. I had never tasted the stuff before, and I never want to again. It certainly had a kick in it, for we both nearly passed out. The general gave a dinner that night at the hotel to celebrate the occupation. The 2 generals and all the staff were present. We introduced Lt-Col to the arak, and he appeared to like it. No one else could touch it. As we were sitting at dinner, a tall, good-looking lady in evening dress sailed into the room and took a seat at a table near us. We all gazed at her, spellbound. We had seen nothing so beautiful for months. She looked so white, clean, well turned out, and utterly desirable. After dinner, we sat in easy chairs, smoking on the broad veranda. The lady sauntered out and sailed past us, taking a chair at the other end of the veranda. She was smoking a cigarette in a long amber holder, and I noticed that the waiter had managed to get her a liqueur from some hidden store. General Myburgh got up and said, "Come along, Trew, let us improve our German." General Botha said, "Remember, I will not have that lady annoyed in any way." We walked over to her and both bowed, and Myburgh wished her good evening in German. She turned on us and said, "I do not wish to speak to you, gentlemen, but if you must speak to me, do so in English, not in bad German." I then congratulated her on her good English accent. She replied, "I am English, and probably speak the language a great deal better than you." She then told us that her husband was a German artillery officer, and that we brutes had wounded him at Gibeon. She went on to say that, being English, she knew how land-hungry that nation was, and that we were only fighting because we were greedy and wanted to rob the Germans of their farms, and that she hoped we would not force our hateful presence on her again. We bowed and returned to the general rather crestfallen. As Myburgh passed Botha, the latter murmured, Not much success, I gather, Myberg.
As the train moved out, he